Welcome to the show where we unearth new ways of looking at ever-evolving life around the world, seen from a number of different industries, cultures, and backgrounds. But there's one thing that unites everyone I speak to. They all want to do their part to make the world better in their own unique ways. It's a uniting passion. Whether they're from the commercial world, third sector, or public sector, from the global north or the global south, my name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. Hello and welcome to episode 36 of TIE Unearthed. Today I have a very special guest with us, Andrea Marshall, known as the Queen of Mantas, as coined by the BBC for their documentary on her in 2009. Andrea is the co-founder of the Marine Megafauna Foundation, along with Dr. Simon Pearce, which is an organization that we have partnered with a number of times over the years, and we will be working with them again in March of 2022. Andrea was educated in the United States and Australia and was the first person in the world to complete a PhD on manta rays. After completing her thesis in 2008, Andrea stayed on in Mozambique to spearhead conservation efforts of the species along the remote coastline. And she's vowed to dedicate her life to the preservation and management of the manta ray population in southern Mozambique. Today, we'll be talking about life in Mozambique and the hardships she endures on her quest to save these gentle giants from exploitation, the challenges that they face in that part of the world, discovery of new species, and so much more. And Andrea said something on this chat that actually really threw me, something about the challenges around the conservation of threatened marine animals, something that I'd never considered before. It's something so obvious, but just confirmed why what they do is so important. Andrea is a true inspiration. Her passion and dedication to marine conservation is thoroughly contagious. This chat will inspire you. So grab that favorite beverage or throw in those running shoes. And here is Andrea. Hello, Andrea. It is lovely to have you with us today on TIE Unearthed. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me. It's World Manta Day, so I'm very excited to be able to be talking to you today.
World Manta Day. God, we couldn't have planned this better. This is wonderful.
Not really. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, Andrea, you're where? Tell the listeners where you're sitting right now.
I am sitting in my office in Vilanculos looking over the Bazaruta Archipelago National Park here in southern Mozambique.
Wow, how amazing. So we're both, we were, just before we started recording, we were talking about, well, Andrea's been living in Mozambique for how long?
Almost 20 years now, just under 20 years.
Yeah, so I'll have you tell the listeners your story and your background, but obviously being in Mozambique, she's also a Portuguese speaker, very humbly saying that she's not fluent, but obviously she's probably exactly the same as me. I'm also a bit of a perfectionist. I've been here for 16 years in Brazil. And also sort of, I can get by with my Portuguese, but I'm also not exactly totally fluent. But we both have North American accents, and I can't believe that we've worked together for two projects over a number of years now, and I still don't actually know your story. I don't know where this accent comes from. So please tell our listeners about you, the work that you do, and just sort of the story of how and why the organization was set up. But, maybe start a little bit before so we can understand a little bit more about you.
Well, I can't kick my accent. I don't think any American can. I'm a Californian girl, born and bred. I was raised in Northern California, which was a fabulous place to grow up, especially if you're a kind of a nature lover. I think it's a bit congested at this stage, but it was wonderful to grow up there and very, very connected to nature ever since I was a little girl. I've always had an affinity for the ocean, and that doesn't necessarily come from my parents at all. They're all computer programmers and, they're not, my mom can hardly swim, it definitely wasn't that I was raised by surfer parents or anything like that. But I think my mom said ever since I was about 5 years old, and it really hits home for me now because I have a 5-year-old daughter and every single day she wants to be something new, as ballerina, or now she wants to be a vet, or she wants to be a dentist. My mom told me when I was 5 years old, I told her I wanted to be a shark researcher. And she said, I never, ever changed. I never changed. She said, I never said anything else. I just wanted to study sharks. I just wanted to study sharks. I just wanted to study sharks. And so that's really incredible for me to realize that I somehow knew, even at that age, that this is what I wanted to do. And as early as I can remember anyway, I remember also, just wanting to be a marine biologist, wanting to be a diver, and wanting to go underwater. I begged my mom to be on the swim team. And then, at 10, 11 years old, I told her I wanted to start diving. And of course, at that age, you had to be 12 in order to be certified. And so I did some Discover Scuba at 10 years old, and 11 years old, I was prepping. And on my 12th birthday, literally on my birthday, I was writing the test to be a PADI open water diver. So you can call me obsessed. I mean, many people do. But yeah, I definitely knew the path that I was on from a very early age. And, it's interesting, though, because I'm also a professional underwater photographer. And there was a stage where, going through university, I actually paid my way through university. I was on scholarships, academic scholarships, but I also just paid my bills by being a photographer. And I got quite good really early on. And I saw, two distinct paths for me. I could become a photographer and be a professional kind of underwater, media photographer, or I could, carry on becoming a scientist. And I was really uncertain for a few years there about what I wanted to do. But the more I was involved in media work and television and productions, the more I realized I actually wanted to be the person in front of the camera. I wanted to be the person, who they were, making the films about, because they were contributing to science in some way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what ultimately cemented it for me. I still dabble in photography. I just came off of a shoot for Netflix right now a couple of days ago. So I still do dabble in media work. And I think it's very important to disseminate my information as a scientist. But ultimately, I realized I wanted to do the actual research myself. And so I did a postgrad in Australia, and then, kind of found that still too restrictive, still too much like America. And I thought, where do all the great explorers go? And I was like, Africa, right? I'm going to be the Jane Goodall, of the ocean. I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to build myself a little hut in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to study something that no one's ever studied. And that's what I did. Nobody had ever done any really work on mantas before. And I had been working with the IUCN in my early 20s and had been given a lot of different species, lots of different animals to do the global conservation assessments for. They're called the red list assessments to determine if an animal is endangered or not. And one of the animals they slid across the table to me was a manta ray. And I remember it being a very impressionable moment because, I've been diving with mantas since I was 12. I mean, who doesn't love a manta? They're just the most glorious creatures in the world. Yet when I tried to do this assessment, there was no information on them. And I had to ultimately assign them as data deficient. And that I kind of was like, how could we be in a day and age, where we can go to space and we don't even know anything about the biggest animals in our ocean? That's crazy. So, living in South Africa at the time, I started to do some exploratory diving in Africa with some of the crews that were going into, going into these far out places. And Mozambique was just opening up from this massive civil war. And we went up there to find out what the diving was like. And I stumbled upon a huge population of manta rays and whale sharks here. And I thought, well, this is it. I now know that nobody knows anything about mantas. I've just found a spot that's opening up, from this civil war and is very pristine and beautiful. And I'm just going to put my flag in the sand here. And I literally built a little grass hut. I called back to Australia and I said, sell everything, sell my apartment, sell my furniture, sell my car, send me a check. And I just never left. And that was 20 years ago.
Oh my gosh. And was it called MMF then, Marine Megafauna Foundation?
No, so that was just me. I mean, I just came out with, with a hope and a dream and a, little twinkle in my eye. And I did a PhD along the coastline. And I think the intention at the time was to do work on mantas and then perhaps go somewhere else. But I did not anticipate falling in love with this country the way that I did. So by the time I wrapped up my PhD, I was so far in. I was so in love with this country. I could see what was happening to it. And I could see that if I didn't stay, that there was just going to be no one else to fight for these animals or, the coastline here. So, one of my other very good friends, very total rock star, he just finished his PhD in Australia at the time as well, and didn't know what to do with his life. I told him, come out to Mozambique. There's whale sharks here. You can study whale sharks. He says, I've never seen a whale shark. How can I study whale sharks? I said, well, they now consider me the world expert on mantas. And, that was just a couple of years worth of, so you could be the world expert on whale sharks. And he said, And he just wrote the definitive textbook on whale sharks and published it about a week ago. So that just shows you, how it's done. And so he came out with me and saw his first whale shark. And like I said, is now considered one of the world experts on whale sharks, just, wrote the definitive textbook. And he and I went from just, studying mantas and whale sharks to deciding that we wanted to go all in. And he and I couldn't find another NGO that we felt was a good home for us. We're really field biologists. We want to be out in the field all the time. We want to be working with communities all the time. We really want our work to be immediately going into conservation and management. And, there was all these other NGOs in the country. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to name them. It doesn't matter. The point is a lot of NGOs aren't based in the field, and we never saw them. They were never here. I mean, they say they work in the country, but we don't ever see them on the ground. So we thought, let's just start our own NGO. And that's what we did. And we were smart enough to not name it, the Manta Ray and Whale Shark Trust or something like that. We decided on the Marine Megafauna Foundation because we had aspirations of basically the concept behind MMF, where it came from is realizing that Africa had saved its terrestrial spaces, these amazing terrestrial spaces like the Serengeti or the Okavango or, Virunga National Park. They've done it off the back of charismatic megafauna too, lions, rhinos, gorillas. And I thought to myself, well, if that model is working in Africa, let us start with the marine megafauna. Whale sharks, humpback whales, manta rays, things that will capture people's attention, but also species that are genuinely under threat. So whale sharks endangered, manta rays endangered, dugongs endangered. The things that we work on are all endangered as well, but they're also highly charismatic and very, very important to study because marine megafauna species are usually the first to go in an ecosystem. They have the smallest population sizes. They're the most vulnerable. And they're usually the ones that are impossible to bring back. You can't breed a whale shark back. You can't breed a dugong back. Once they're gone and extirpated, they're gone. So that was the idea behind the organization. Study these big charismatic marine megafauna that are threatened. And then off the back of them, because they're large and they require large spaces, then we can protect these critical marine habitats in Africa. And that is exactly what we're doing.
How inspirational. My God. Tell us perhaps a little bit more about the challenges that you face in your part of the world that listeners may not know. I mean, you touched on top lines just now and the reason for why you set up the organization, but what are you facing daily there? This is just, it has to be the most challenging place to do work in the world. And in some ways it kills me every day. I mean, the logistics behind what we do, I actually married a logistics specialist in order to just survive. And he's fabulous at his job, just one of the best. But, it kills us every day. I mean, everything is so much harder than it is anywhere else. But at the same time, you kind of grow into relishing that in some weird way. I go back to the US now. We have one project in the US now, and everything is just so easy. God, I can relate. I can relate so Do you know what I mean? Much to what you're saying. Yeah. And so it's this weird relationship that I have where I want to rip my hair out, and some days I just hate Africa. But I just love it too. And it's what keeps me going every day because I'm constantly on my toes. My brain is constantly thinking, things are constantly going wrong. So you really get good at fixing problems. They have a saying in Africa called make a plan because everything breaks. So you always have to make a plan every single day, And so, yeah, it keeps you on your toes. But I mean, we've lived through Category 5 cyclones. We've lived through devastating fires where, everything we own burns. I've had malaria 8 times. I've
It's not easy living through a pandemic in Africa. Let me just tell you that. Everything. My husband's crashed head first into the ocean in our microlight multiple times. We've been bitten by snakes and bitten by sharks. He's got bit by, the worst probably is he got bitten by a spider and almost had his leg removed from that spider. It just goes on and on. It just goes on and on. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a really, really awesome book one day.
Yeah. You mentioned just in passing, but I think it would be really, really helpful for people to understand. This is a question I ask a lot of people based in other parts of the world, just because I'm mostly based in Brazil. We work with a lot of people in India. We work with people all around Africa, and everyone's been impacted by COVID in different ways. And we've just had so many stories from so many of our partners around the world. How have you, but also your work at MMF, been impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, it's interesting. On one side of things, it's been difficult. Anyone that lives in a developing country, especially one that's reliant on like a neighboring country to provide it with supplies, the supply chain for Mozambique comes really through South Africa. And South Africa was hit very hard by COVID, as I think a lot of people are aware, especially the Delta variant, which I think even originated there, or one of the variants originated in South Africa. And so, our supplies were really compromised significantly over the last couple of years, and that proved challenging. I think the hardest thing for us, though, was just not having access to healthcare and actually, having to watch friends get COVID and not be able to get the healthcare they needed and ultimately succumb to it, and knowing that they may or may not have survived if they had better healthcare, but they would have had a better shot, right? And so by the time my husband and I got COVID a couple of months ago, we were terrified because we had seen and lost friends and thought, and I'm immunocompromised. And so I just thought, well, this is it. I can't get out. And if it gets bad, that's it. There's nothing you can do. And the worst part about it is both my husband and I got it at the same time. And my 5-year-old daughter
childcare
didn't get it. She didn't get it. And of course, nobody, she had been exposed and nobody knew if she was going to get it or not. So no one would take her. And so we just had to keep her isolated in our house. And it's really difficult to care for a really young child when you can't really come in contact with them. And she was hysterical because we had spent the last year and a half telling her, wash your hands, you don't want to get this thing. And now both of her parents have it and she can see how sick her dad is. And it was really, really scary. It was just awful. It was like a nightmare. But, just like most things, we figured out how to navigate through it. But, on the other side of the coin for us, COVID shut down a lot of our international operations, places that we work like Myanmar and the Andamans and the Philippines and Madagascar. And we weren't able to focus as much on international research. There wasn't flights, countries weren't open and things. So we had no choice except to focus on Mozambique 100% of the time, which we haven't done ever. Because, yes, in the early years I did, but once MMF started picking up and we had all these global projects, I've never spent, full time here, without interruption. And so for the last 2 years, we've been able to focus on nothing else except our work in this country. And it's really been phenomenal. I've been living here for so long, but there's so many things I've learned by not having to ever leave and just being here for every moment, every day, whether it's working with communities or just being able to be on the reefs every day, all these nuances that I had missed before. We've discovered a bunch of reefs we never knew about because we had the time to do that. We did a lot of research. We've expanded our research programs to include a bunch of new species that we never thought we could handle because we never had the time, but now we do. Yeah, so we're studying wedgefish, which are, kind of a group that's just been declared as the most endangered fish group in the world. We've started a program on small-eyed stingrays, which is the largest marine stingray in the world that no one has ever studied before, and we've just started tagging them for the first time ever. We're starting to expand our work out to do more work on dugongs and leopard sharks, which are also endangered. So it's given us the opportunity to really double down in Mozambique, if you will. And I think without COVID, that may never have happened. So there are things that we're very grateful about in terms of the pandemic as well. So it kind of is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share that sentiment for sure. I think a lot of people can. It's necessity is the mother of invention for us, for sure. But,
Yep.
with every challenge, there's an opportunity. And there are silver linings. And you could just get completely just overwhelmed by challenges like a pandemic. Or you sort of buckle up and say, okay, let's see what we can do to make the most of a shitty situation, and you did, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
And not surprising.
And
not
we
surprising
said that,
by your approach to life in general.
But Simon, our co-founder too. I mean, he struggled a little bit more because he was never based in the field like me. He was based mostly in New Zealand and Australia, and would go into the field. So he struggled a little bit more than me with COVID. But we just told each other, listen, we see a lot of NGOs collapsing and just caving under the pressure of pandemic, loss of grant money and things. And we just thought, well, we could go down like some other people, or we could try and reinvent ourselves. And that's what we've done. And I think it's really benefited us. And in many ways, the lessons that we've learned now, I think will stay with us. I think we're really going to make sure that we spend more time instead of just trying to, and I think this is should be a goal for all NGOs, which is you get a model, the model works, people respect your work, you start getting more money, and you expand your programs. Probably too much, because you always want to say yes. You always want to bite off more, you always want to say yes. But by saying yes and expanding too much, you don't do any location or any project the justice it deserves, if you understand what I'm saying. So I think expansion is okay, but only to the point where it's sustainable. And I think this has showed us again, like, even though we thought we were doing a good job in Mozambique, we could have done a better job with more attention. And now that I understand that, I think I'm going to apply that to all of our programs around the world and make sure that we don't do more than we can, and we always try and do our best in any of the places that we're working.
Yeah, again, it's sort of a recalibration, isn't it? It's times like this where you reflect and you think, okay, how can things be done differently, and take learn from what worked. And I think for our listeners, it'd be really helpful, just perhaps you can explain. I mean, you mentioned in passing again that you work in a number of different, countries around the world. Obviously in Mozambique, you do a lot of research. Can you just bring to life, I think it's really helpful for the listeners to just understand what it is. Do you do exactly the same stuff that you do in Mozambique, in the other countries around the world? What are your programs?
So the mandate of the Marine Megafauna Foundation is to save our ocean giants from extinction. And we do that primarily through research. We're all field biologists. So our first stage is to go out and do research on these endangered species like whale sharks or manta rays or marlin or, leopard sharks or dugongs or whatever it is. We're doing, research on these animals. Then we take that information, and it can be anything. We do a lot of tagging work where we put tags on animals and learn about their movement patterns. We do a lot of genetics. So we take tissue samples and kind of learn about animals through, population genetics. We do a lot with photography. So a lot of these animals have unique spot patterns or color patterns that allow us to identify specific individuals, and then we can track individuals through populations over time. And with all of that research, we take information and then we immediately make recommendations to managers. So areas that are protected now, are they doing a good job? Do they have the information they need to be able to manage these populations effectively, that are based on good science? And then a lot of times we find with the research that the areas that the animals need protection are actually not protected. And then we can work with governments to appeal to create new protected areas or extend the protected areas to the areas where the animals need it. We also work a lot on global conservation treaties. So both Simon and I have lead authored all of the red list assessments for manta rays and mobulas and whale sharks and a lot of these marine species, meaning that they now have the global conservation status because we've done a tremendous amount of work to make sure that they have these global statuses, and then we kind of help to get them listed on treaties like CITES, which is the Convention for International Trade in Endangered Species, making sure that they're not allowed to be trafficked across international borders and sold illegally. And then things like CMS, which are the Convention for Migratory Species. So, it's easy to protect an animal if it doesn't move, but what if you're talking about a migratory animal in the ocean that lives in the high seas where nobody owns that place? how do you protect those types of animals? So we kind of list them on those treaties and then work with different governments to protect them in the high seas. So we do a lot of these types of work, and we started in Africa. We were born in Africa in Mozambique, and we quickly expanded out to neighboring countries. So we work in South Africa, we work in Tanzania, and a little bit in Kenya and Madagascar, like Eastern Africa. And then, people liked our model. They liked what we were doing. And we moved to, Southeast Asia. We work in Indonesia and the Philippines and Thailand and Myanmar and a little bit in Australia now. And then we moved to the Americas. We started working in Ecuador and Mexico and Belize and now Florida. So we just have programs all over. And what I meant by my comment before is that, it's exciting to expand. I'm very proud of the work that MMF does globally. But I also think it's important to make sure that the quality of work, the reason that we started MMF is so that we could be on the ground 365 days in the places that we work. And it's important that we don't move away from that we maintain, because that was a very astute thing that we decided to do, because I think the reason that we're good at the work that we do is because we're based here full time. And so, wherever we work now, we have teams on the ground 365 days. And I really want to make sure that we continue to do that through time, because I feel like that's what gives you the edge as a conservationist.
Now, I love what you do. You're so passionate. You do incredible work. And I hope our listeners now can just understand just how much you're doing and how important it is for the health of the planet, the work that you're doing. But I'm just wondering, in the past, how has TIE impacted you guys? And also, how do you hope TIE can help you guys moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention, external people getting involved, in things that they're passionate about. It's really about finding ways that you feel like you can value add and looking at, those details of what is it that I can do and what might they be missing. We went one step further even with these mega expeditions and these expeditions that we've started, which is that a lot of people were desperate to kind of experience what it's like for us to be out in the field every day working with these animals. And they would write us and say, hey, can we come out and join you? And I'd be like, no, of course not. I don't, if I just said yes to everyone that wanted to come out, like I would just be babysitting people all day. Like that doesn't work. And yet Simon and I sat around the table one day and we were like, we can't afford to get to like the Andamans, for instance. It's cost $40,000 to charter a boat to go out there to put the tags on we want. How do we afford that? That's just so expensive. And then at the same time, we're getting all these emails from people saying like, we want to come out with you. And then all of a sudden, like light bulb moment. And it was like, wait a second. Why don't we invite all these people that want to come out with us on expedition? And then they can help pay for some of these really ridiculous costs like chartering of vessels. And then the MMF scientists can come on board and we can do our research, but they can be doing it with us and they can experience, for a couple of weeks what it's like to be out in the field with us. And that was a huge light bulb moment for us because, it really was a way to be able to have everybody win. And I think, it's also great because once you've been on an expedition like this and once you've really experience something, most of these people are followers or fans or donors for life. Most of the people that sit on the board of MMF have been on our expeditions before. A lot of people that we partner with regularly in the future, like yourselves, I think, they've actually come out or worked with us before. And I think it's just there's citizen science, where people can go out and help collect data for scientists, but even more than that, it's just community involvement. And I don't just mean the local communities on the ground with us. I mean, the global community. What can you do as a global citizen in different ways to support these organizations that you really believe in? And I think that's the kind of messaging we need to push is that everyone can make a difference. Even if, you don't have a PhD in manta rays, who cares? You're an expert in something. And what can you do for these organizations to help make them better?
And just for our listeners, just so the mega expeditions, this like light bulb moment that helped inject real capital into the organization to help you guys do stuff. So when that light bulb moment happened, we had Matt Roach from Anomaly head out to Mozambique and through a TIE program and was based with you guys for 30 days to help position that, to find sort of the messaging, the creative work to be able to really inspire potential divers to join you guys. did the whole strategy. Fantastic. I know that you were super happy with it. And then we had Mike.
We were, and the point, and again, the point there being, again, we're not experts in marketing. We're not experts in, developing expeditions or even some of the media needed to be able to push expeditions like that. All we knew is that there were people that wanted to come and experience what we were doing, and we wanted people to be able to get involved and also be able to help cover some of those costs. But then where do you go from there if you don't have someone come on board to help you? So again, that's just a really good example of someone with a skill set coming to help us. And in that case, it wasn't just a singular, moment or activity or something. That's going to be something that marine megafauna expeditions is something that's going to be able to reinvent our organization in a certain way over time. So, that impact is super exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I loved Micah's project as well, because again, this situation of it's sort of, okay, well, we got to this spot, but then, all right, we've got all the communications, but how do we then, what's the sales pipeline? Like, what do we do to kind of, okay, so people are interested in what happens and how do they sign up? And then how do we convert them into, and how do we field applications and that whole logistical side of things? And it was great because Micah got on board from WPP and she's like, okay, I'm going to tackle this one. And again, 30 days later, I think you guys managed to sell out your first one, I think, based on the
absolutely we did
model. Yeah, which we were looking at it being like, look at the power of cross-sector partnerships. It's super powerful.
I know. That cross-sector partnership is exactly what I'm talking about. And sometimes it's really important to help elevate these organizations that are doing good work, because usually the people that are behind them are, singular focused, and we're trained in, we're scientists, we're trained in a very specific way. And a lot of people go and they say, oh, I don't see a nice website for that organization. They must not be very good. Actually, they're probably the best one because they don't have the time to have shiny website. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the only way that we can really survive and thrive is by other people coming to us and say, hey, I have this skill set and we really like what you do. Let us help you. And it's such a powerful thing, like you said, when people can come together for the power of good and do something great together.
And it's a real win-win because obviously, changed the lives of Matt and Micah being based with you guys and seeing your passion and seeing the impact. And Lauren, God, how can I forget Lauren? And then of course, Lauren, I quote Lauren actually a lot in a lot of our presentations because, for her, there was actually a point where she was based with you guys. She loved the experience so much. I remember there was a lot of reflection afterwards. And she said, Philippa, oh my God, I'm looking at the passion that everybody at MMF feels, and they are giving their everything to improve the world. And I have this real challenge now going on in my head, basically, to kind of, okay, so now I leave and I go back to New York and work in advertising, and oh my God, like, do I need to quit my job and live on the beach and tofu and help, their work? And I said, what you need to understand is, everybody has their skill or their passion or how they can contribute. And this is obviously how, MMF and everybody there is contributing. But now that you understand the power of what you know and the power of the skills that you have, and now knowing the challenges that the world faces, you being able to change the private sector and to be able to, rally the network that you have, the access to funds that you have in the private sector is huge. And if you can change the direction that a huge client that you work with goes in, or you change their processes, or you get things to be done differently, then that is a huge way that you can make the change. And actually, I truly believe it is these cross-sector partnerships and this empathy and this understanding of how the world works in one place and the other, in one sector and the other, and bringing these worlds together, that will make the change that the world actually needs to, that needs to happen to make it more sustainable.
I 100% agree with you. And I think it should be more, you can't make it mandatory, but I hope more companies understand the impact that these types of little sabbaticals can have on individuals, not just to refresh them and connect them back with maybe some of their passion, but just like you said, that experience will sit with you forever, and it can it can help guide you in your choices and the things that you do later in your life, even when you go back to that job that you have,
Totally.
And I think it's really something that more companies should look into doing.
Yeah. That's really great to hear you say that. Thank you. Now tell me, we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I'm just keen to know, what keeps you up at night worrying, but what also gives you hope?
Yeah, well, I mean, the state of the world isn't that great, is it? And I think being a conservationist and a scientist, you probably know more facts and details than an average person, and it gives you gray hair. It seems many days it seems insurmountable. And I have a lot of students and a lot of interns and people that work for me who come to me and just say, I'm starting to get depressed. It seems like we're not winning. How can I find the energy to go forward? And it's not even just, interns and students, it's, colleagues as well. And I think it can become really overwhelming to think about the big picture, really, because there is so much negativity and there is so much going wrong. So what I decided to do and what I encourage other people to do is you need to tackle smaller bite-sized problems, things that are achievable. I think you're in control of your own life and, your own choices, your family's choices. So there's a lot of, for me, I feel good when I know that I'm making good choices for myself and my family. That's very empowering. But also as a conservationist, I can focus on specific animals or specific areas or specific projects, and I can do those as well as I can to the best of my ability. And then I have to hope that that there's the queen of the penguins, and there's the champion of the rhinos. And there's got to be other people that are like me, killing it every day for their projects and their species. And so I can not worry about them now, because I can hope that there are people as passionate as me working in other areas and on other animals. And I think that's what keeps me grounded, because when I look at our projects, I see a lot of hope and a lot of success. So I keep thinking to myself, well, if each of us, just does the best that we can, and we're seeing little, good change in the projects that we're doing, then there's got to be some positivity out there that we're just not seeing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just makes me, and it helps you. And it just helps you. So, and I just tell people, you just can't get overwhelmed, because that's the beginning of the end. You just have to stay positive, and you have to do everything that you can every day on the work that you're doing, and just not worry about the rest.
It's back to what we said, actually. It's back to what we said in the face of just COVID, It's, with every challenge, there's an opportunity. And we are facing a lot of challenges, but you could just do nothing and just get really depressed, or you roll up your sleeves and say, okay, what can we do? And I couldn't agree more. I feel very much along that line of thinking. Now, what are you working on at the moment that you'd like our listeners to hear about? What haven't I asked you that you'd like to talk about as we wrap things up?
Well, I mentioned at the very beginning that I'm sitting and looking at the sort of Bazarut Archipelago National Park right now, and it is a spectacular view. It's a spectacular place. At the moment, I think the singular focus of my work right now is to expand this protected area to become what I'd like to see as one of the most important marine protected areas in all of Africa. And we need about an area that's about 3 times the size of the area that's currently protected. And we're actually actively working with some very large donors and government to create an area that's about that's about the same size as what's protected now. So that'll effectively double the area of protection. And that's happening right now, like as we speak, over the next couple of years.
Congratulations.
So I already feel like after 20 years of work, we're already getting to like 2/3 of what my life goal is here. But I'd like to I don't know, I'm sure there's someone somewhere one day that was the brainchild for the Serengeti, for instance, and they must be feeling pretty good about themselves. And I really would like to be, sipping some lemonade on my front porch one day and know that I helped create one of Africa's most important marine protected areas, and feel like that was my life's achievement. And so that's what we're working on at the moment. And it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of research and a lot of a lot of meetings and a lot of donor support, but if we can get there, I think it'll be really important for the continent, because unfortunately the ocean in Africa is just not cared for in the same way as the terrestrial spaces. Everybody's all about the lions and the rhinos and the elephants and the gorillas, and not that those things aren't incredibly important, but there are so many important seascapes in Africa, and they just get neglected. And so if I can be a part of a movement to make Africa care more about their oceans, then that will be a life well spent.
Oh, Andrea, it's so inspiring. You don't know this about me, but my partner, he's a professional sailor, and he's been sailing since he was 5. And he's sailed from he's done the Cape to Rio regatta numerous times, and he's gone to, he sails internationally regularly. And he just recently sailed to France from Rio, and he talks a lot about just the difference in what he used to see when he was 15 to what he sees now, the changes in the weather patterns, and he will be so just even though we've worked with you 3 times, actually I thought it was twice, 3 times in the past, even just this conversation for me has made me even more passionate about the work that you do, and just I can't wait to share these stories with him, because I've learned so much from this conversation. So thank you so much for your time. I know how busy life is, but I just think that it's so important through these types of, I know that you're on Netflix and you've got movies and shows and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like this is sort of reaching another target, and I just think it's so important for the people who follow Thai and for future people who are just interested in getting involved and supporting your work, just to know about it, because it's so, so important, and your passion is infectious. So thank you for the time and for just all that you do.
No, you're very, very welcome. I love talking to people. I mean, it gets lonely out here in Africa, and I think connection and conversation and things is really one of the most important things for conservation. And so I try not to say no to any opportunity, but it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And yeah, happy World Manta Day. Couldn't have done
Happy
better.
World Manta Day! Fantastic. Enjoy your day.
Cheers.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with Thai. If you work in the commercial world, whatever your profession, your position, or your experience, then Thai could be for you. You may have been in business for decades, but have always felt there's another way. Or you may just have a few years experience, but want to do more. Equally, if you want to create game-changing employees and see your company impact the world, we've got you covered. Thai has never been more necessary than right now, and you can be a part of it. Reach out to me at philippa@theinternationalexchange.co.uk and I can tell you more. Or join the Thai Accelerator info session for more information. apply.thaiaccelerator.com. Better leaders, better companies, better world. I'm your host, Philippa White. This podcast has been co-produced by Berna Vieira and me, music by Berna Vieira, and artwork by Kelps Vahais. I hope we'll meet again soon.